Just a little bit more detail on rolling this car over the first race after we got married. I told you that Mike Whalen, this guy put up the car. He's actually the inspiration for two of the characters in the books. He was a tool and die guy, and he liked working the late shift, night shift, because he didn't like people, didn't have to deal with them. And he's kind of the impetus behind both Old Man Finzio and parts of Butch Bohunk. But he was the guy that helped me out, showed me the way. There were nights when he took parts off of his car and put them on mine so I could make the race the next day. Completely dysfunctional family. He married a white trash girl named Ruby, not that he was any different. And she's the inspiration for me and Marlene in the books. And the deal he made me, because we had no money, was that I would build he had the car. I would build the chassis, he would build the motor, and I would get to drive it. And we finished it, and we went to our first race, and I qualified on the outside of the front row right next to Bob Hinman in his mustard-colored Porsche, and just ahead of Tommy Fennell in his Saab Sonnet. And the race starts, and Bob and I are swapping the lead every other corner, which is what happens when you're amateurs because you're leaving openings. You watch Formula One, there's no hole because everybody's good, but when you all stink, there's a lot of openings. And we're swapping the lead, and Tommy, who was really the most experienced driver of the three of us at the time, but had the least car, was sitting there waiting for us to knock each other off the track so that he could win the race. And Bob and Tommy were involved in a points chase for the championship at that point. And about halfway into the race, all of a sudden, the engine dies. Wait, it doesn't die completely. It goes down to idle. And so I chuff around to the pits, and it turns out the throttle linkage has fallen apart because some idiot forgot to put the cotter pin in. So Mike, he never had a kind word for anybody. He was the most cantankerous SOB I ever met. He puts it back together. He says, well, the race isn't over. Let's not start our new car off with a DNF. Get back in there. So I hop in the car, strap in, pull out onto the track, and I mean, we're many laps down. But I look in my rearview mirror, and who's coming up behind me? But Bob Hinman and Tommy Fennell still fighting tooth and nail for the lead. Well, I'm not in the race, but I'm damned if I'm going to let them catch our new race car. So I go like a bat of hell, and to this day, I don't know if I made a mistake, if something broke, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, I'm going into corner 2 at Black Hawk, which is essentially a little flat-out kink to the left, or it should be flat out, and all of a sudden, back end snaps out one way, and I turn to catch it. Then it snaps the other way, and I turn to catch it. And each time it snaps, I'm getting further and further behind in my steering. And it taught me a lesson. It taught me when I teach driving school, I always say, if it snakes 3 times and you haven't caught it, you might as well put your head down. And sure enough, I went off sideways and backwards, the car, all of a sudden, it's violent, and I'm seeing sky and ground, and it's flipping and tumbling. Remember, this is the first race after we're married. I got just married on the front of the car. Flipping and tumbling and flipping and tumbling. All of a sudden, it lands upside down. Whoomp! And it's dark. But I know I'm still alive because I can smell gasoline. And I'm looking out that cut-down door on the TR3 dangling from my belt. And I can see all these little upside-down corner workers running in my direction. And then I make my first serious mistake. No, this will be second. And it's something you have to do once to learn. When car is inverted, before unbuckling, check the distance between your helmet and the ground. Bam! Now I've hurt myself. So I come crawling out from underneath. I get shakily to my feet, and I can't believe what I see. I'm upside down, the car's a mess. Tommy Fennell in the Saab, and Bob Hinman in the Porsche, fighting for a championship, have both pulled off the track to see how I am. I stand up, I'm kind of shaken. I walk over to him, I say, Bob, Tommy, I can't believe this. In the middle of your race, you stopped to see how I am. Bob looks at me, and then he looks at Tommy. Tommy looks at him, looks back at me, looks back at Bob. Bob looks at his shoes. Tommy looks at me and says, Bert, I don't know how to tell you this. That was the checkered flag lap. You just rolled your car after the race was over. Absolutely true. Some interesting things happened, though, at the dealership. One of them, absolutely true, and this story is in the Potside Companion short story book. I had a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow convertible taken from me at gunpoint on a test drive. It's a phenomenal story. I'm not going to give away the ending. You will not believe who the guy was that took the car. The other thing that happened, so there I was, no race car, no money. And I'd written a couple little things for On Track magazine. They had asked me if I wanted to be their correspondent for the pro races in the Midwest. As Michael knows, magazines are notoriously cheap. And thank you. They're notoriously cheap, and they want to find a guy in the area so they don't have to pay for the plane fare. And I had told them, no, I'm a racer, not a writer. But after the car was wrecked, I thought it was a way to somehow stay involved. And I called them back. You remember that writing deal you were talking about? So I started spending my weekends on the pro circuit. It was an interesting time. I was studying IMSA races. And it was the year that Holbert, Al Holbert in the Lowenbrow car with Derek Bell, and the Whittington brothers and Randy Lanier, the famous drug dealing team. They're in trouble again, by the way. If you're online, you know about it, or Bill is. And it was, honest to God, it was like a medieval morality play done as a racing, season. And at the end of the season, Randy Lanier won the championship. Holbert turned out to be one of the most amazing guys. I mean, in the sense that he was a born-again Christian, straight as an arrow, and if anything went wrong, he always looked at it as something that he personally had done wrong. It was never the fault of anyone on the crew. It's all because he was almost Christ-like in that. It was amazing. The Whittington brothers had all kinds of money to spend. Everybody knows that they rode Atlanta. And so the story goes that they could land their drug planes dead stick at night on the back straight. And it was also a money laundering scheme. They would have a, quote, pro race, unquote, when you could have thrown a bomb and not killed anyone. And then they would show up at the bank on Monday morning with bushels of 20s. The less said about that, the better. But I made some great, great contacts, people that are still friends, like Gene Felton, initially when I was covering the races. Then this guy called me, P.D. Cunningham, who we'd run against each other a couple of times, just in time trials and such. They put together a entry-level pro team for Firehawk and escort racing, and there was a blow-up right at the end. He called me up, he said, would you like to be one of our drivers for a 24-hour race at St. Louis? And I said, what does it pay? He said, a share of the prize money. Now, mind you, the prize money isn't enough to keep the car in brake pads and the crew in beer for the weekend. But I'm a pro now. So we did it, and we started out with this car, a Toyota, because it was the only one that the team owner could fit in. He was about 10 feet tall, Martin Diepering. And we ran some 24-hour races. And at the one in St. Louis, the very first one, in the middle of the night, we'd had a problem under the car. They pulled in for the stop. And with the crew under it, just like this, the car fell off the jack and landed on the crew chief and one of the guys that worked with us. And fortunately, the crew chief was in there sideways with his shoulders up and down, caught the weight of the car and kept the other guy from being crushed under the oil pan. They were okay, but they were both injured. They carted them off to the hospital. They took them to East St. Louis Hospital on a Saturday night. They were the only people in the emergency room without a stab wound or a gunshot wound. In the morning, they came back to the track. They took a cab back because they didn't want to stay there. And they showed up. I mean, all they needed was a fife and a drum. One got his head wrapped up, and the other one's arm was in a sling. But we finished. And we did the 24 Hours of Mid-Ohio, which was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. And we did Sebring. We did a lot of the great tracks that I like here. My first race at Watkins Glen was in that car, although it broke early on, but still it was my first drive at Watkins Glen. But I was learning something. One is, I didn't much like the pro racing lifestyle. It's a long drive or a plane trip and a motel room and a paddock and a motel room and a plane trip. And it was, in spite of the fact that we were running for peanuts, it was brutal competitive. And I didn't love the cars. I liked the racing, I didn't love the cars. But the worst of it, and I have to be honest, we had 4 national champs that raced with us from time to time, and I could kind of hold my own with all of them. But Petey was always a little bit quicker. And he went on, he runs Acura's factory team now. He's won more races and championships in pro sedan racing than anybody. I didn't know at the time that he was that special. Everywhere we went, he'd be that little bit quicker than me. But he would always be that little bit quicker than me. And he'd take less out of the car. And I almost wrecked one of the team's cars trying to show that I could do what he could do. And it finally began to dawn on me. Bert, he's better than you. And I realized if I pursued this dream of a pro racing career, on a good day, with somebody else's money, I'd be sneaking into the bottom half of the top 10. And is that really what I wanted? But I still love to race. I love the cars, I love to drive. Thinking, what am I gonna do? And then for Auto Week, I went down to Road Atlanta, my very first vintage race. And I wrote, I think, the very first story about it for Auto Week. And I coined the phrase, I believe, the cars are the stars in vintage racing. And in those days, you had 250 LM Ferraris and 330 LMBs and 289 Cobras and Lister, I think that's Lister Jag, not a Corvette. Fell in love with it. And I love the cars. These are cars from when it was still art rather than science. Just listen. There was a quality to it that I never found in modern racing. And then I got to know Joe Marchetti. Now Joe Marchetti, no choir boy, but he did some of the most generous things for me. He and his brothers ran a restaurant in Chicago called the Como Inn, and he's the guy that started the historic races at Road America. Ran it out of his own pocket and lost money every year until it started to be a hot property, and then the track took it away from him. Again, Joe was no choir boy, but he had a program for the race, and he asked me to write a driver's eye view of Road America for the program. And in return, he let me drive a short wheelbase Berlinetta, race it at Road Atlanta, because Joe didn't like to separate himself from money. This was easy. He owned a lot of cars like that. Some of them he owned 3 or 4 times. He'd sell them and buy them and sell them and buy them. Great showman and a great sense of what vintage racing should really be all about. I wrote a story about it for Auto Week. And then a friend of his, he had sold the one and only Ferrari bread van, which is a car with an unbelievable history, full of intrigue, full of backstabbing, full of backroom deals, and a fabulous looking thing. And I got to drive that to do a feature story for another magazine. And then they invited me to be an instructor at the Ferrari National Meet at Groton. Almost got killed there. I had one student, nice guy, but rich guy from Long Island. He had a Ferrari boxer, and he'd been to one Skip Barber school, so he knew everything. And he drove pretty good, very aggressively, and he's holding the steering wheel so tight that you can see the plastic like bulging above and below his hands. And we get to turn 3 at Groton, which is kind of a sweeping right-hander that off camber, slightly downhill. And from the moment he turns the wheel, I know we're going off the road. No question in my mind. And fortunately, there's a lot of runoff room. And so I said to him, just as calmly as I'm talking right now, you're about to go off the road, go straight. Don't try to turn the car. Let it bleed off speed, and then we'll bring it back on and go back to the pits. And he did all of that, because if you turn it sideways, that's when the wheels dig in and you roll like a pencil down a desk. He did all of that. We go back to the pits. He switches off, and we're sitting there undoing our helmets in the crackle of cooling metal. And he looks over at me and says, "You were awfully calm out there." I said, "You wait till I get up out of this seat and see what I left there. You'll see how calm I was." But I just taught for the Ferrari Club again at Road America recently. And to be honest, this is a little aside. The current generation of supercars, and I just wrote a story about this for Vintage Motorsport. And I don't care if it's Ferrari, Audi, Maserati, Lamborghini, you pick it. They're too damn heavy, too damn fast, and too damn complicated. It's heresy, but I'd rather go on track in a spec Miata and try to go as fast as I can make that go. Anyhow, end of that. Now, Joe also did something else for me. I knew where this particular Alpha Spider was that had been built as a race car by Horst Queck. Does anybody know who Horst is? He was Alpha's de facto Trans Am racing team. And he took a lot of the GTA stuff and put them on these cars. There were 5 of them built. I knew where this car was in a garage, or in a barn, literally in a barn. And I went to Joe, I said, I can buy this cheap and I already have some of the parts to fix it up, I'll make you a deal. You come up with the cash, I'll build the car, I'll race it, we'll win a bunch of races, and when we sell it, you take your initial investment off the top and we'll split the rest. To my amazement to this day, he said, sure. There it is done. It's the only decent mechanical thing that these two hands have ever built. I mean, going all the way back to the plastic models. This is the only decent thing. It was a pretty thing. I noticed a little Vigo olive oil can for my catch can. You know, Italian wife, Italian car. And it turned out to be a great race car. Now, this is in the early days of vintage racing, when if you had some experience, you looked like Sterling Moss. And we won 13 out of 15 races. It wasn't until the 14th race that I ever got beat by a 2-liter 911, which was unheard of for an Alpha. And I'm actually leading these 2 GT350s at Mid-Ohio. But again, the level of driving then was nothing like it is today. I mean, now it's pretty serious stuff. And this at Tamiami Park. Joe paid me to go down there. We were the curtain raiser for the kart end of season race. I finished 3rd overall behind Bob Snodgrass from Brumos in a Mazda-powered Chevron and Bob Bondurant in a Cobra. And I came 3rd. And I was thrilled about that. And Joe was happy too. So the next year, the feature was 250 LMs at his race. And he had this gorgeous long nose. And I went to him. It was a real hot weekend. I said, do you think you need a co-driver for the Enduro? And he was about the color of your shirt. And he said, yeah, maybe you better go suit up. My sneakers left rubber streaks across the grass as I went to grab my suit and helmet before he changed his mind. Here I'm getting into the car for the very first time ever at the pit stop. Went out and drove it, had a great time. It's still one of my very, very favorite cars. I think they made 32 of these. Wrote my first ride moot story for Vintage Motorsport. And then people started offering me or agreeing to let me drive their cars to write stories. And there I am in the Allard we saw earlier, Sid Silverman's Lister Chevrolet, the Silver Bullet Lotus that Brian McEachern ran, a Lola Mark I, Cooper Formula Junior, GT40. Boy, it was turning out to be a pretty good deal. As a matter of fact, I had this wonderful Alpha race car kind of sitting, and Joe came to me and he said, you know, my son's old enough to start driving. What do you want to buy me out of your, buy you out of your half? And at the time, Carol wanted a new kitchen. And I don't think I have to tell any of the married guys here how that worked out. But my first ride moot story was in, June of '88 for Vintage Motorsport. And I'm still writing for them today. And for each issue, if I'm lucky, I'll get a neat old car to drive. And I've gotten some really, really good drives. This is me in another 250 LM that's just a couple years ago. It's owned by the Collier Collection. I'd actually come down to drive this car, which is a very important car to me because that is not just the kind of car, that's the exact car that won the first race that I ever saw at Meadowdale. It's one of the 3 Reventlow Scarabs. And I mean, to me, there they are winning it. This is when Meisterbrauser owned them, Augie Pabst and Harry Hoyer running at Meadowdale. They'd always left an impression on me. I always thought It was the most beautiful sports racing car ever. That and the D-Type maybe, and maybe a birdcage Maserati, but this is the only American one. And I was so thrilled to drive it, and then all of a sudden, while I'm driving it, all of a sudden there's like a and the engine stops. And I coast to a halt. I mean, I can't even calculate what this car is worth. And I'm sitting there in that strange silence when all you can hear is like the buzzing of insects. And everything else is just way too quiet. And they bring the tow truck and tow me in. We're out of gas. No problem. That same day, I got to drive one of two 8-cylinder RS61 Porsches. They had a 906 there, which has always been one of my favorite cars, but they had some mechanical problems, so I didn't get to drive that. But I did get to drive one of the 5 Corvette Grand Sports in the world. And earlier in my ride-mooching career, I had driven the Penske Sunoco car at Mid-Ohio. That's 2 of the 5. So I have actually mooched my way into 40% of the world's supply of Corvette Grand Sports. Not that I'm bragging or anything. And the Collier people have been very kind to me. They had me down to Palm Beach International 2 years ago to drive an original GT40. That's actually, it was a street car that was delivered to Grady Davis from Gulf Oil. They couldn't get their race car in time, and so they converted his street car to be a race car. Unusual driving pair. Dr. Dick Thompson, the great American dentist / racer, and Jackie Eakes, the famous Belgian driver. And they finished first in class and 6th overall at Daytona in '67 in that car. And the 2 little things from outer space on top, the people from Stanford, from, what do they call it?
Revs.
Yeah, the Revs Institute, are doing data collection on the car and the driver simultaneously. What they expect to find out, except that guys are having a great time driving race cars, I'm not sure. But it all looks very official. And I also got to drive this. This is the Mark II with me in it. 427, 200 mile an hour top speed plus, although I couldn't do it there. That was a lovely car to drive. Big and heavy, absolutely stable. I flat fell in love with it. Some memorable drives, and we're getting on. Lotus 17, I was doing a story on different Climax-powered race cars because I thought that would be a great way to get into a bunch of the cars I like. David Whiteside offered me a co-drive right here at Watkins Glen in this car, which was actually Colin Chapman's answer to the Lola Mark I. We ran together for 4 years, and we won the Rolex Endurance Championship twice, back to back. I want to say 93 and 94. We won at Sebring, Mid-Ohio, where else? Savannah, I forget. Oh, Road Atlanta. Here we're on the podium with some friends of mine, Bill Farron and Jack Lewis, who are Porsche guys. And you can get kind of an idea what a tiny car this is. In the last 2 years, we raced mostly against Jack Bockstrom, who some of you may know is the manager of RM Auctions these days in his Aston Martin. Great races. Sometimes we won, sometimes he did. The neat thing was the 2 cars would be turning the exact same lap times, but making it in completely different ways. So we had races where we'd pass and repass 2 or 3 times a lap, always at the same places. And Jack invited me up to Canada. He had bought and restored the original Chaparral, and he calls me up. He said, "Bert, I can't fit. Do you want to be the test driver?" What he really meant is, "Bert, do you want to come up and write a story about it and make sure to mention that it's not for sale?" Because that drives the price up even further. And then I drove this that he owned. This is the Sadler Mark V, which was really the seminal mid-engine Chevy-powered, really the seminal Can-Am car, if you will. Absolutely terrifying aerodynamics. At high speed, it feels like if you just hit the steering wheel like this, it'll spin like a top. Today, if you win the Rolex championship, you get a Rolex watch. We were in the early days, they gave us this little Baccarat crystal paperweight that said Enduro Champions. I was kind of chagrined at that, especially since they spelled the word Enduro wrong. And so the magazine printed this picture to try to make it look like a little more than it was. It's actually this big. And we had fun. We went to Topeka to race there, and they had a ladies' race. So Cliff Pass and I from Passport Transport, we went to Kmart, and we bought the largest size brassieres that they had and some mopeds. We fastened those onto our helmets, put the brassieres on outside of our driver suits and stuffed them full of shop rags. Drove up to the grid for the ladies' race, and actually Rocky Mountain Group has a very active women's group, women racers. And they said, bring them on. We did well, but we did not win. We got beat. I've done a lot of Lotus racing. I've driven this several times. The guy that's the crew chief on this built that hot rod Finzio Sinclair pickup. Great car to drive. This is another Lotus drive. In the front car, that's Phil Lamont, who's the North American Dunlop tire distributor. Me behind and Dick Baker's. We're both in Lotus 18, similar power plants. This is down in Savannah. On Saturday, he beat me by a foot. And on Sunday, I beat him by 2 feet. And we've been fast friends ever since. Jared Mitchell lent me his Climax-powered 7 at Pittsburgh. And I won the race, but I almost killed a guy. This is true. And that story's in the Podside Companion. There's another Lotus at Summit Point. And those were in the days when you'd get a lot of these cars turning out, when you'd have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 Climax engine sports racers. This is at Portland. My friend Tom Black had taken delivery of a race-ready Lotus Elan 26R, just shipped over from England. If anybody from England tries to sell you a car that they say is race-ready, wound up in a great race with a guy named Dick Buckingham and another similar Elan. We were like this. I finally got by him. I pulled away just a little bit. And by this time in the weekend, the shifter had come off in my hands twice. The entire exhaust system fell off and went skittering out under my wheels. So we didn't finish that race. Won this race a couple years ago in Lotus 7 at Heartland Park, Topeka. This is this past spring at Road Atlanta in Dave Bondin's Elite. And David Hobbs was there, who started his career in Elite. So I got a good story out of it because he is extremely quotable. Oh, this is funny. This is at Miller Motorsports Park. I went there when it just opened because I knew the designer. And we were going to do a photo shoot. So we had a photographer going around from spot to spot. And me and Augie Pabst Jr. and Tom, built the track, and he and Augie were going to be teammates in a pro series. So we were just going to go out on the track to, be in pictures. And each lap, whoever was in front would go a little bit quicker, and the guys behind. We had more fun. And this is on a track that nobody knew yet. D-Type this is at Palm Beach. This is the late Tom Mittler's car, and I know this is going on. We're almost to the end of this part. There's a good story, though. Tom brought me down, let me drive a couple of his cars. And I always had loved D-Types. I'd never driven one. And he turned me loose. And at the end of the weekend, everybody's loading up. And the only car that's not back in his trailer is this D-Type. And he said, I'm going to go out for a couple more laps. So I'm sitting there talking to somebody, and all of a sudden I realize it's quiet. The worst sound you can hear at a racetrack is quiet. So we walk over to the pits, and then we hear the sound of the tow truck towing it in. And behind it is this long, thick trail of oil. Rod right through the side of the block. Tom gets out, gives me a smile, puts his hand around my shoulder and says, Bert, I'm sure glad that happened when I was driving. And I said, you think you're glad? This at Sears Point. It'll always be Sears Point to me in a Jag 120. Lister Jag up at Mount Tremblant. I don't know what this, I think this is one of those plastic bodied things with a Volkswagen engine underneath. No, that's a great car, and it was very kind of Bob to let me drive it at Lime Rock. Driven a lot of races in this car. It's a Causi. There's only 3 in the world. This one's got a Porsche Flat 6. I set a record at Road America in this car. I was out all by myself, nobody around me. Unbeknownst to me, the plug at the bottom of the crankcase had fallen out, and these have a huge dry sump tank. And I drove all the way around to pit in before saw the oil pressure fluctuate, shut it down. My record is 58 bags of oil dry and 2 hours of downtime to clean up the mess that I was not popular that weekend. This is at Autobahn. I was chasing, I forget his name in the Alfa Mark 7, but I caught him and passed him. We were just like this with 2 laps to go and I ran out of gas. I've had a lot of great races in Morgan's. This is Super Dave Bonden's car, and this is another one of his. Their crew, his daughter Stacy, has turned into a hell of a driver. This is Baby Doll Morgan, which I've raced twice, once at Thunder Hill in California and twice up at Road America. Chevron, my favorite Mark probably. Al Lewis put me in his Chevron Atlantic at Road America. Did well, so he said, well, I've got this Chevron B36, let's run it in the Enduro. And we did, and we won. And I said, if we win this race, I'm going to lick the bug splats off this car. There I am. Another Chevron here at Watkins Glen, that's Lowell Blossom's car. That's me co-driving with, you probably remember Charlie Kolb. That's his car. We ran it at Ginger Man. We come up for the start. I'm in for the start. I'm on the second row on the inside. All this big Corvettes and crap around me. We come up, the flag waves, I go for the next gear and the shifter comes off in my hand. Then all you can do is like raise one hand, go turtle fashion with your head and hope nobody collects you. We did finish that race. Another Chevron, that's Hamish Somerville's car, Road Atlanta. Oh, I love this car. Rick Carlino owns it, we co-drove it in the Enduro. Only downside is when you come up behind a big GT, you know they cannot see you. And we wound up second overall, first in class, behind Travis Engen in an Indy Lights car, Alba Courier. Oh, everything now so far makes me look like a real star, like I'm a real good driver. We're about to fix that. It had actually been in storage for about 5 years. This on the Sunday, the other race was Saturday. As you can see, I've moved up on the rear a little bit. I'm known for my human stuff. here I screw up. I think I'm going down to second, and I get fourth, as you will see. Heading into the last lap. I've been afraid to take that turn at the end of the front straight really, really fast, but this time I figured I got to do it. Oops. I added that sound effect. And naturally, some idiot was able to camera it. Doesn't get any better. Although I added that sound effect, it didn't really make that noise. It happens. This is the car that Michael knows well. I got to drive it once. Michael drove it several times, which I think shows a lack of imagination. Beautiful car, but I've driven 3 cheetahs, which makes you wonder why the second and the third one. This is the better handling car. Enjoyed it a lot. They're not as bad as their reputation, but what could be. People always ask me, they think, what's the scariest car I've ever driven? You'll be amazed. That's a little pre-war Austin 7 Special. A guy said, why don't you go out in it? It looks like something you'd find under a kid's Christmas tree. It's not fast. It's absolutely terrifying. It handles like there's a hinge in the middle of it. And you're overflowing the cockpit. I kept thinking, I want to pull this into the pits, but I didn't want everybody to laugh at me for being afraid of this thing. I thought, if I die in this thing, no one will keep a straight face at the funeral. And this, from the scariest to maybe one of the most fun. This is actually a very good Ford Pinto that was built for the under 2.5 Trans Am. The engineer was Lee Dykstra before anybody knew who he was. John Schenkel worked on the crew. Didn't really have enough motor back then to be competitive, but it turned out to be a great car. It was co-driving. It's owned by Ed Smith. And his regular driver, Gary Johnson, is a very accomplished national and Trans Am driver. He had a national Sprite, and he brought his rain tires, and it poured. And, well, take a look at 6th overall, and take a look who's right behind us. That would be Bob Snodgrass and Hurley Haywood in the Brumos 914-6. We were real happy about it. There's nothing like coming up behind a whale-tail Porsche in a Pinto. And you see the guy look in the rearview mirror and then do a double take like this. This is the championship-winning Trans Am Javelin, first with Penske, then Roy Woods Racing. This is at Portland. I got to drive, you mentioned Ollie Lugo earlier. Ollie let me drive the Formula One Scarab front engine and the rear engine car, so I think I'm the only guy outside of the original drivers to have driven one of the Scarab sports cars, the real thing, and these two. I mean, if you read all my books, in the fourth book, the whole Scarab story is in there because it's such a great story. Renault Alpine or Alpine, great car. It's like a warm-blooded 911. But of course it's French, so these things happen. This car almost killed my bike class instructor who I was taking for a ride at Milwaukee State Fair Park. We're just pulling out of the pits, and all of a sudden and the steering wheel is no longer connected to anything. The drag link had snapped in two. She'd never been in a race car before, and at that point it's going wherever the front wheels are aimed. And fortunately we went off on the grass, didn't hit anything. I turned absolutely white. I'm like this, and she's looking at me like, oh, this happens all the time, doesn't it? And I said, no, not really. There's an Oscar Formula Junior that was built by the Maserati brothers after they left and came back and started their own company. Fabulous car. I loved it. And I got out of that and into this, which is a state-of-the-art Caterham. And I wrote a story about it for Vintage Motorsport. The Caterham's much faster, much more capable, but you can drive it without any finesse. You can drive it brutally and go fine. And the Osprey, you gotta romance it a little. And I thought that was really interesting. This is, I think, second to last. I got invited to be one of the celebrity guest drivers at the SRT Pro Series. This is, I think, 2 Aprils ago at Road Atlanta. The other celebrity guest driver, NFL star, pro wrestler Goldberg, who's a huge car guy, had never really been in a car race except for the Toyota celebrity event at Long Beach, but loved it. And we went racing. It was a standing start. I've never done a standing start before. The chief steward came over, and who was an old Terry Irwood, old drag racing guy. He said, you know, Bert did good for his first standing start, although we did have to send somebody over to tap on the windshield to get him going. And it's real competitive. It's like Spec Miata on steroids, because all the cars are equal. I had a great time, really enjoyed it, and loved the team, loved the cars. And I wound up first in the celebrity group. Bill was second. He wasn't real happy about it. But eventually we made up, and he's been a friend since. I love Alphas. That's TZ1. That's the Trans Am champion. And then beaten by the 510 GTV. That's an old Alfa Monza, but I think that's Seattle. That's the Lee Midgley Trans Am GTA. I think that's Groton. That's right here at Watkins Glen. Royale that I drove with the last owner, and the new owner had me back. I've driven that 3 times in the last 2 years, and I love the car. Did the VSCBA event, or VDCA event, and they have a pig picking and oyster roast. And this is a great event. There's the pigs cooking. Here's the people enjoying oysters. There's me doing my Michael Jackson imitation with one glove on, shucking oysters. There's the car's owner trying to buy a stolen bicycle from me. And this is just about 2 months ago at Parma, New Mexico in a Radical. That was fun. This is the very last one of this group, so stop yawning. I saw that. No, it's okay. That's my gauge to know when I'm over the red line. This is Dave Burton. He called me up and said, you know, you're always writing about British cars and picking on Porsches. Would you like to co-drive my 356? And I said yes, and the car's built by Vic Skurmans. I don't know if any of you know Vic, but he's one of the really good Porsche drivers and preparers. Put me in it at Road America. I didn't break anything. So he invited me to co-drive with him in the Enduro at Mid-Ohio. And we wound up winning our class and beating Vic and his co-drivers. We're feeling pretty good. So he calls me up a week later and he says, let's do the PCA event at Ginger Man. And PCA is all like whale tail 911s and so forth. He said, they'll hate us. Because Gingerman, there's really no straightaway. So this is the drive.
Sorry about that. We have an unorthodox action at the
It didn't take more than a couple of laps for 2 of the 911 guys to run in and check. So that's why they were full push up. And the 356 has got a trick gearbox where first is like second. So at this point, going 15 miles an hour, I'm dead. And I know it. And that's the segue into the book section. This is the first book. I thought about writing a novel about car racing for a long time, and I was down at the Bahamas Vintage Grand Prix. In '86, I was driving Alex Quattlebaum's Elva Courier Spider, and it was fun, it was dangerous, it was through the streets, it was a rum hangover every night, every morning. Great party in a different place each night. And then the morning came. And I was sitting around the pool with a vicious rum hangover, and I started to write The Last Open Road. And it took me 8 years, because I'd never written a book before. I didn't know how to do it. I kept giving up. Finally, after 8 years, I had the manuscript done, and I thought it was pretty good. So I sent it off, unagented, unasked for, unloved, and unwanted, to every publisher in New York. And if you can read what they say, your book is a masterpiece, but unfortunately, we're rather picky. So we got rejection slips from every publisher in New York. And I went to my wife and I said, I really think there is. Some of them liked the book, but felt there was no market for it. Because one of them said, very snottily, as they only do in New York, there's no market for car fiction. So I went to Carol and I said, I think they're wrong. So we took out a second mortgage on our house with her agreement, permission, support, and we published it. And I loaded a bunch of the first copies up. Actually, they were delivered to us at Road America in July. And I'd made up a bunch of these cheesy posters. I mean, we didn't have any real reviews, so I just made stuff up like, let's see, buy this book or I'll kill him, Carol Levy. I laughed my ass off, Yasser Arafat. I just made stuff up. And I told Carol and Adam, I was racing that weekend, I said, put these up where everybody will see them. Well, the middle of the afternoon comes, and I realize I haven't seen a single poster. And then I have to go into a porta potty. And they have put them up over the urinals and inside every porta potty on the... My wife's a genius. You have a captive audience. And they're going to read it because they can't leave till they're done. And we also, out of the blue, this logo was just done with press type in 5 minutes. And we made up decals. And now, you see them all over the place. I mean, I didn't plan for that to happen. I can't believe it when I see it. We started selling a bunch of books. After we sold out 2 printings, it got picked up by St. Martin's Press, which at that time was a fairly prestigious, even thought of as a little bit literary publisher in New York. I thought, this is it. This is what every author dreams of. And as they told me, your book is perfect, so naturally we'll have to change everything. And they made me edit it, and I didn't want to. I don't know how many of you saw Amadeus, where the king tells him, it's too long, there's too many notes. And of course, the Mozart character says, no, it's perfect the way it is. That's the way every creative person is. They think that the way they did it is the right way, but they made me edit it, and the edited version is better. I had the help of the guy that was my champion there was, he's a gay academic editor in New York, no interest in car racing, liked the story, liked the characters. He had Michael Denneny, he had a tremendous effect on the development of my writing. But we were a little unsure about the dust jacket. They wanted something different than what I'd done. And they suggested something like this to try to get a little more. Actually, this was done as a joke by the guy that did those paintings out there. Another guy thought that to really sell, we should do something like this. But we finally wound up with a painting by Bob Gillespie, who many of you know. Is it Bill Gillespie or Bob Gillespie? Bob. He's here today. Yeah. He is. Where? He's here. Right here. Hey, thank you so much. He did such a wonderful job. And he also did the cover for the second book. We changed it for the new printing, not because we didn't like what he'd done, but because when I bought the rights back, well, we're not to that point yet, I couldn't use what they had used. And also we wanted something a little more ambiguous so it wouldn't type it as a car racing novel in the bookstore market. At any rate, we got written up in the Chicago Tribune, and I waited for the money to roll in. And waited. And waited. And they really didn't do anything to promote it. So by contract, I had to send them the manuscript for the second book. And I sent them a cover letter. I said, I'm not looking for a bigger advance. I want to see a promotional budget and a marketing plan. If you're just going to sell to the market of the people from the racetracks and from the car hobby, I don't need you. And we wound up $55,000 apart. And when their option ran out, I went back to Carol and I said, I have an idea. We're going to go back to doing this ourselves, but why not do this? Why not fund a book project the same way my racing is funded with sponsorship and advertising? And it was one of those silly ideas that you have in the middle of the night, and the next morning you wake up, that can't work, it's too simple. But I started making calls, and what do you know, people started buying ads. So you get through the first major episode in the book, and you come on this old car magazine that never existed, Auto Week, W-E-A-K, and the late Leon Mandel never forgave me for that. And believe me, once you got on his bad list, you were there. There was no getting off. The weekly journal for gearheads and grease monkeys. Everything on the cover refers to something that happens in the text of the book, and then inside, our table of contents is our sponsors and advertisers, and we mixed real ads with fake ads with pictures of the cars that are in the book. Mercedes-Benz, thanks to Craig Morningstar, bought a full page and dug an ad out of their archives, not only from the same era, but showing the same car that's in the story. Had a lot of fun with it, had some funny ads, learn race car mechanics at home. Our professionals can show you how to fix any part of any race car. Heck, they's all just 4 wheels and a dang motor. And if you read the fine print, on-the-job training available, much to our customers' dismay. This is a good friend of mine, Dennis Eade, who prepped that Chevron that we won with at Road America. And we've continued this on. This book won the Benjamin Franklin Book of the Year Award in 2000 for that idea. Got us written up in Publishers Weekly and USA Today because no one had ever done it before. And we still do it in the ad on the right by my late great friend Art Eastman, I think is our pinnacle, Vulgari watches. It's time to make a statement. Really had good, oh, and I hate big SUVs that aren't used for big SUV stuff. So on the bottom right, stomp the earth with your Humjob howitzer. And if you look closely, it's running over the Sierra Club building. Oh, and the Montezuma's Ferrari logo, which Art Eastman came up with. I mean, it's just chili peppers. But Ferrari was not amused. They sent us a cease and desist letter. And I've got a copy of it out there in case someone doesn't believe it. 2 winters ago, I had a trademark so they can... So those are the books. I had a lot of fun with them. There's one more yet to come. Part 2 of the Steamroller, and then I'm going to work on 3 novels that have nothing to do with cars. And the Potside Companion, the short story book. There's me enjoying it where you should. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm getting to drive neat cars, meet wonderful people, find an audience, which is all any author really wants. And I'm going to let you, this is the last slide, second to last, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have all this love for all the cars and the history and everything, but the real romance is with the road. I tell students in driver's school, think of it like music. The road is the piece of music, and the car is the instrument you get to play it on. And to close up, hang on. The Potside Companion is almost all funny stories. The 2 serious ones. I had someone killed right in front of me in a race at Moroso, and that story's in there. But the rest are funny, and there's also 4 pages of motorsports poetry. Now, nobody is writing motorsports poetry, so I believe I'm on the pole. And this is a poem about what it's like going fast in a car when everything is right. It's called In the Eye of the Storm. There is a peace in speed I could never find in stillness. A solitude so pure, rich, and satisfying that it saves me from the future and protects me from the past. Inside that secret center, that teeming, streaming vortex, there is only now, now, now. Grabbed onto with both hands and cradled like a baby. And that is the end.
We don't want Bert to take any of those books back, but he made me laugh and cry here, and he has done what every red-blooded American boy in this room would like to do. All those wonderful cars, but I did have to stop and think about some of the basketball stars who have slept with 10,000 women. But you've done something much better. All of us would rather do.
And I got a better woman than they'll ever have.
Yes.
Be sure to come back to the center. We have really great things to eat, and we've got a raffle on some wonderful Indianapolis glasses, and we've got a couple of surprises too. So come on over and enjoy it.